How's it going, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the quarterback situation in the CFL in 2023. And this year is quickly becoming the year of the injured quarterback in the CFL. As we'll get into, there are so many quarterbacks that have missed time. I mean, there's been years like 2019 where a lot of starters went down, but the difference this year is that a lot of teams have had to go to their third and fourth options in their quarterback depth chart because of the injuries that they've suffered. So let's take a look at the situation league-wide. So over on the board, I have the quarterbacks that would have been considered the starting quarterbacks for their respective teams at the beginning of this season. I know some of these have changed, but I think just for consistency's sakes, these are the quarterbacks that I would have considered the starting quarterbacks for each given team at the beginning of the season. And I also have how many starts they've missed out of how many games that team has played because of the bye week situation. We don't have the equal number of games played for each team. So we'll see what number of starts that each quarterback has made relative to their given team. And then over here, I also have the backup quarterbacks that have played games for this team and how many passes that they've thrown in this season for their respective CFL teams. So let's get into it. At the top of the board, we have Winnipeg Blue Bombers with Zach Collaros, who has largely been healthy this season. He's going to be back in the lineup this week after missing one game, about a game and a half because he missed a little bit of the week prior to that. But he did miss the one start, but he has started 9 of 10 games this year, has been relatively healthy, and has been kind of in that MOP conversation still, looking for that third straight MOP. And I think that it's good that Collaros has shown a streak of consistency in terms of his health, because that is something that has haunted him throughout his CFL career, going back to his time with Hamilton and obviously his time with Saskatchewan and how that ended. So it's good to see Collaros still relatively healthy, going to be back in the lineup this week, and hopefully there's no lingering signs of poor health for him. Now for Toronto, we have Chad Kelly, who has started 8 of 8 games, which is one of only 2 quarterbacks in the league that have started all of their team's games this season. But there's an asterisk here because he did leave one of their games against Calgary a few weeks ago, and that was in the middle of the first half, so I think he missed about 2.5 quarters in that one. So ultimately, he hasn't played every meaningful snap for this team this season. And the player that ultimately ended up finishing that Calgary game was Cameron Dukes, who was really playing his first meaningful snaps in the CFL in that one. I forgot to mention for Winnipeg, Drew Brown is the quarterback that started the one game that Collaros didn't this past week. So he's thrown 60 passes on the season, a good amount, about a 2-game sample size there for Drew Brown, and he's looked pretty good in the action that he saw. But Cameron Dukes for Toronto looked really raw as expected in his first CFL action, but again, only throwing the 15 passes. And then for BC, you have Vernon Adams Jr., who has dealt with that injury that he had a few weeks ago, but he's largely played most of the games, 8 out of 10 weeks that he's played this season. And I think that he's been really good. He's another one of those players that's in the MOP conversation. These top 3 guys are really the front runners so far this year for the MOP, and that's largely because they played a lot of their games and their teams have had success, obviously. But Adams, like I said, 8 of 10 games that he started this season for the BC Lions. They've got Dane Evans, who's been in a couple of games. He started the 2 games, I think, and then got injured in the middle of that Winnipeg game, his second start of the season. He's thrown 79 passes this year. And then Dominic Davis, the third quarterback for the BC Lions, has thrown 21 passes this year. Kind of a career journeyman backup type with Dominic Davis. And then you go over to the Montreal Alouettes, Cody Fajardo, another quarterback that's been largely healthy in this season where a lot of these quarterbacks have missed a lot of time. Fajardo's missed the last couple of weeks for the Montreal Alouettes, starting 7 of 9 games, but I think he's going to be back like Collaros for that Thursday showdown against Winnipeg. So excited to see him back on the field, and hopefully, like Collaros, can stay healthy the rest of the season. And I think, he's largely had a very good season, coming back from those couple years that he struggled the last couple years in Saskatchewan. So it's good to see that from Cody Fajardo. But the last couple weeks, Caleb Evans, former Ottawa Red Black, has started games for the Montreal Alouettes and has gotten a couple of victories for this team. So really proving the value of the backup quarterback. Great example of that They are in Montreal. And then moving over to Saskatchewan, you have a team that's had to reach deep into their depth chart at quarterback so far this season after the injury to Trevor Harris in the 5th game of the season. Harris has started 5 of 10 games this year, and that's going to continue to be, games missed from him because of the long-term injury that he suffered the 5th game of the season for the Rough Riders. It's hard not to wonder where the Rough Riders would be right now if Harris was healthy, because he was looking very good in his debut season for the Rough Riders. So interested to see how he plays when he gets back, if he ever gets back on the field this year for the Rough Riders. But they're not ruling it out, but at the same time, I don't expect him to be back on the field for the Rough Riders this season with the injury that he suffered. And then the players that have seen action for the Rough Riders in his stead, Mason Fine started a handful of games. I think it's 3 starts for him, has thrown 132 passes. Kind of a mixed bag from him. He started to look like he was turning it around before he went down with his own injury, a hamstring injury, I do believe, and he's going to be potentially back for the Labor Day game for them. But Jake Dolegala, the 3rd-string quarterback, came in last week and made his first start of the season for the Rough Riders. Threw 54 passes so far this season and looked very good in that start against BC, leading them to victory. So I would expect that he starts the Labor Day Classic, given that he, looked very good in that game against the BC Lions. But Mason Fine and Dolegala, I expect both to see some time down the stretch here until Harris potentially comes back from that injury. But again, another team that's had to reach deep into their quarterback room so far this season. And then you go to the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I'm wearing the Ticats for a reason, not just because I'm a Ticats fan, but because of the quarterback injuries that they've suffered this season. Their projected starter for this season was, of course, Bo Levi Mitchell, who they brought in from the Calgary Stampeders in the offseason. He started 3 of a possible 9 games so far this year. Unfortunately, got hurt in the 2nd game of the season, missed a handful of games, and he came back, and then he got hurt again. So don't know when he's going to be back this year. It's expected that he is going to make a return at some point. We don't know when that is, but really unfortunate start to the season. Even when Bo Levi was on the field, he was very much a struggling quarterback out there. And then you look at the quarterbacks that have started in his stead. Matthew Schultz, 104 thrown passes for the Ticats this season. Again, started, I think, 3 games for the Ticats, just like Mitchell, and then got hurt. He was looking very promising. I'm not lighting the world on fire by any stretch, but I thought he was a stabilizer for that team and the best quarterback they've thrown out there this season for the Ticats. And then the 3rd stringer, Taylor Powell, who has started the last couple of games for the Ticats, has started 3 games overall, I think. 1 game before Bo Levi came back for the 2nd time. He's thrown 102 passes so far this season. Hasn't really looked the part of a future starting quarterback in the CFL, but it's so hard to judge a guy that's coming into a situation like that where he's a true rookie, hasn't had the opportunity to sit on the bench for a year. So he's predictably struggled for the Hamilton Ticats so far this season. So the Ticats have perhaps been one of the most cursed teams in the CFL so far in terms of their quarterback injuries, but there's one more down here on the board that I think has been a little bit even more cursed so far this season. And then you go to the one team that has not missed a single start from their starting quarterback so far this season and has not missed a meaningful snap for their quarterback so far this season, in Jake Maier for the Calgary Stampeders. He's played 10 of 10 games, and I think this is another thing why it's such a concerning start to the season for the Stampeders, or the first half of the season for the Stampeders, is that they're the only team in the league that hasn't missed a meaningful snap from their starting quarterback this year, yet they still find themselves at 3-7 on the season. So I think that is a true indicament of how poor they've been this season, and I think that Jake Maier really has the rest of the season to really prove that he is the guy in Calgary going forward. I think one thing working in his favor, obviously, is that he's been healthy throughout the whole season. He hasn't been a guy that has been nicked up the first couple of years of his CFL career, so he's proven to be a pretty durable quarterback. It's just the play on the field has to improve for him going forward. But yeah, like I said, the only quarterback in the league that hasn't missed meaningful snaps so far this season. Even Chad Kelly, who started every game, missed that 1/2 against Calgary a couple of weeks ago. And then you go on to the Ottawa Redblacks, probably the most cursed team in terms of their quarterback injuries this season. Jeremiah Mazzoli was the predicted starter to go into the season. He, of course, was coming off a big injury last year against Saskatchewan in that Garrett Marino incident. He has only played 1 of a possible 10 games. Of course, when he came back to the lineup against Hamilton earlier this season, He was expected to be, the lead guy for them going forward, but then he immediately got injured. He's out for the season again. Achilles injury with him. Really, really unfortunate what's happened the last couple of years with Jeremiah Masoli and the history he's had with injuries. So it's fair to wonder if we've seen the last of him in the CFL. And then in terms of who's replaced him after he's been injured, you have Dustin Crum, who's led the way in terms of the amount of passes thrown, 179. He's really taken the hold of that starting job. But he was actually the fourth quarterback going into the season on their depth chart. They had Nick Arbuckle originally as their number 2 quarterback behind Masoli. He started the first couple of games of the season, threw 56 passes, wasn't very inspiring, so they decided to go to other options such as Tyree Adams, who was their original number 3 going into the season. He got hurt in his first start after looking very promising for the Red Blacks, torn ACL, out for the season, so super unfortunate what happened with Tyree Adams. And so they're left with Crum and Arbuckle on their quarterback depth chart, and they're rolling with Crum going forward. I don't blame them for not going back to Arbuckle at this point, and Crum has shown some promise, but again, a guy that's a first-time starter, like a guy like Taylor Powell, Jake Dolegala, these guys are very young, very inexperienced in the CFL, and it's very hard to expect them to play at a high level right out of the gate. So very interesting to see what's happened with the Ottawa Red Blacks quarterback situation this year. I think they've been the most cursed team in terms of it this year, already playing 4 quarterbacks in the first 5 weeks of the season. So that's insane. And then you go on to perhaps the most unique situation in the league in Edmonton, where Taylor Cornelius, who was the projected starter going into the season, he has not missed a single game due to injury. So I put him as a 7 of 7 possible starts for them this season, because the decision to bench him was a decision. It wasn't just an injury that caused him to go off the field. They've started games with Jared Daggy at quarterback, a true rookie once again. Trey Ford has started games the last couple of weeks for them. Looks like he's going to be the guy going forward, but we'll see. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's very interesting to see what's happened in Edmonton, but they haven't really suffered an injury in the quarterback room, one of the few teams that hasn't so far this season. So, very interesting this year in the CFL with all the quarterback injuries. Kind of put a dark cloud over the season, in my opinion, with all these guys that have been out. I mean, what would have happened if all these other guys would have been healthy? Trevor Harris, Masoli, I think those are the ones that really stand out to me, because Bo Levi wasn't looking too good before his injury, like I said, but Harris and Masoli, you don't know what they would have accomplished this year if they would have been healthy. So at the end of the day, I think it's interesting when you look at the quarterbacks that were supposed to be their starters at the beginning of the season and how many games that they've missed. But I think a silver lining to this is that a lot of these backup quarterbacks, the guys that are the future of this league, because I think a lot of these guys are older and they're not necessarily going to be the true starting quarterbacks going forward, the true star quarterbacks in the CFL going forward. These guys are getting a lot of reps, so I think that is valuable in a sense to the CFL, but at the end of the day, in the short term, it's a very bad thing in terms of the quarterback injuries, and I hope that the quarterbacks that are still healthy right now can stay healthy for the rest of the season, and it's just a better league when the quarterbacks are healthy, obviously. And then just a couple of stats to close us out here. Missed starts by quarterbacks in terms of these 9 guys so far this season, 25, so that's over a season's worth of games just from your backup quarterbacks, playing this year. And then in terms of passes thrown by backups in meaningful snaps, so these are not counting those guys that just come in garbage time for the starter when they're not injured. 987 thrown passes, so that's like 3 starting quarterbacks worth of passes, basically, because a lot of quarterbacks have thrown around 300 passes at this point of the season. So just pretty staggering numbers so far in the CFL. Would be interesting to see what the record is for most amount of quarterbacks that have played in the CFL in a given season. Someone would have to let me know about that in the comments section. But with that said, that is going to be the end of today's video. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And with that said, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.